Hey, welcome back to the channel. I have a quick tutorial for you today. This is just a simple game mechanic. It's really an effect that you can put on an object. I used this effect for my drone in the game that I created for a challenge. I did a whole devlog about it you can watch right here on this channel. I will link that in the description. I will also link the game itself over on itch.io. That will be down in the description as well. And the mechanic is how this drone is floating around our player and then is able to follow our player in a fluid motion while still maintaining the floating movement. It's not real hard, but it did take a little bit of research to come up with in the first place, and I thought I would share it here. So I'm going to start a new project. This is going to be very basic. I'm going to call this drone. You can call yours whatever you want. I'm going to go with a 720 landscape and a viewport of 640 by 360. This doesn't matter. We can change this inside the project. And go ahead and check optimize for pixel art and create. So I'm going to change a few things over here in the properties panel where it says a viewport. I'm going to click inside and copy, and then click on the layout and go into size and paste. So now the layout and the viewport are the same size. This just makes it easier for us to work with. Okay, in the layout properties, down here where it says project properties, hit view, and this takes us back to where we started, and scroll all the way down, and you should see full screen mode. By default, when you check optimize for pixel art, you're going to get letterbox integer scale. And what that means is if we play this, we have all this black blank space around our layout. And if I increase it, the size of the window, it just stays one size until I move the screen or the browser, the window, to a smaller size. It's increasing in increments. So to avoid that, instead of letterbox integer scale, I just want letterbox scale. And that will give us the size, width, or height of the window. It scales up and down to no matter how big the window is. Okay, enough of all that stuff. I am going to double click on the layout and scroll down to sprite. Let's insert a sprite. I'm going to change the size to 16 by 16. And let's get our origin tool here, and I'm going to go bottom middle. You can always come over here, right click, and say quick assign bottom. I'm using the number pad on my keyboard, and bottom middle would be 2. Okay, with the paint bucket tool, I'm going to get a nice little green color, make it a little darker. I'm going to drop the saturation way down, maybe bump up the luminance. This does not matter. You can do this however you want. I'm going to fill it, make it whatever color you want. That's what I'm going with. I'm going to exit out with that selected. I'm going to rename this ground. And let's go back into this. For whatever reason, I put it in the bottom middle. I want it on the bottom left. So 1 on the keypad, or right click on the origin, quick assign, and that would be bottom left. Okay. Click on the layout again, bring up the layout properties, come over here to grid size. Let's change this to 16 by 16. And turn snap to grid on. This will make it easier for us to place things. And about 1/3 of the way up from the bottom, I'm just going to place it there and stretch that out. Okay, let's double click and create a new sprite. Place it wherever you want. Let's change the size to 16 for the width and 20 for the height. And I'm going to put the origin in the bottom middle. So this time, yes, in the bottom middle. Now I'm going to go to our fill tool. This is going to be our player. I'm just going to get like a blue color. Make yours look however you want. There we go. I'm going to exit out with that selected. Let's rename this player. And because we have snapping turned on, we can snap them right into place, right on the ground. With our new player selected, let's go over here into the properties and scroll down to behaviors, edit behaviors, add a new behavior, and then scroll down to platform. Let's add that. And we can change a few of these values. I'm going to change our max speed down to 180. I'm going to bump up both the acceleration and the deceleration to 2500. Take jump strength down to 400, and everything else can stay the same. Gravity 1500, max fall speed 1000, and default controls. I'm just going to use the arrows on the keyboard. So leave that ticked, and then click on our ground object. Go over here to behaviors. Let's add one and pick solid. Okay, if we play that, we can now test out the values that we set for the platform behavior. So I like that. You can change those up if you want. I'm going to stick with that. All right, let's double click one more time on the layout and go down to sprite, and let's insert that. Let's change the size to, I'm going to go 18 for the width and 12 for the height, and zoom in. And this time I'm going to pick me a nice little orange color. Again, make yours whatever you want. And we're going to get the circle tool with a border thickness of 1 and only the border option checked. And in the top left corner, I'm going to click and drag down to the bottom right corner. And then with the fill tool, let's fill that in. And with the origin point tool, let's put that in bottom middle. Okay, exit out of that. With that selected, let's change the name to drone. And we are all set up. So I'm going to just place this slightly above his head there. With the drone selected, back over here in the properties, I'm going to go to behaviors. And let's add a new behavior and scroll down to sign. Let's add a sign behavior. If you are working in the free version of Construct 3, you will have to play the game to preview the sign behavior, which you'll see it's going back and forth because it is set to horizontal. If you have the paid version, you can preview it right in the layout. So for the rest of this video, I'm going to do our previews in the layout so that we can change the values and see how this works. Okay, up here in movement, we can set what the sign behavior does. So it's on horizontal now. If we change it to vertical, if we change it to width, it gives us this squash and stretch effect, size. So the sign behavior can do a lot of really cool things, especially as far as effects go. I'm going to set this one to vertical. That's clearly too much. So we can come to magnitude, and it's set at 50, which means this is moving 50 pixels in either direction. So if I went 25, now it's moving half the amount of pixels in either direction as it was before. But I'm going to take this down to 6. A very subtle floating, and it's still a little much for me, but I like the distance, the 6 pixels in each direction. So I'm going to go to period and bump this up to 6 so it takes longer for it to complete a sine wave. And now we have a much slower, more subtle floating look. But I'm not all the way satisfied with that. So let's add another behavior and add, scroll down, and let's pick the sine wave again. So we have these two sines. This is the one we just put in, and this is our new one. So I'm going to go to the top one, double click on it, and at the very end of sine, I'm just going to add a capital V. That will stand for vertical. And then we can double click on this one, erase that 2, and put a capital H for horizontal. Okay? So on our new sign, the sign H, it's already set by default to horizontal. if I push preview on this, it'll play both signs together. So it's very subtly going up and down on the vertical, and it's going crazy on the horizontal. Again, default of 50 for magnitude. I'm going to come down to 16. So what we have is kind of a circular motion sometimes, and then we get like a figure 8. I want it to be a little more random, or seem more random. So I'm going to make the period, well, actually, if we made it to 6, like the vertical sine wave behavior, we get more of a circle. And it's kind of a predictable movement. Goes up and to the left, down and to the right. Up and to the left, down and to the right. So I'm just going to make this period 5 instead of 6. That kind of mixes it up a little, and it doesn't run the same pattern every time. So this is our floating mechanic for the drone. And if we play that, it floats like we told it to, but our player moves, the drone doesn't go with us. So we want the drone to follow us. Let's head over to the event sheet. So let's add an event and go into System, and we want every tick, which means every frame that the game is playing. So let's add an action, go into our drone, and I want to set position. And I just type that up here, set position. Click on that. The X position we want to follow is going to be the players, or player.x, and then player.y for the Y position. And if we play that, we did a couple of things. One, we put the drone's origin matched up with the player's origin, which both are at the bottom middle of the sprite. And it follows us, but it follows our every movement. And we want it to kind of, sit back and subtly follow us. But the other thing is, obviously, our sign behaviors are gone. Well, they're not gone, they're just not taking effect. And that's because every single frame of the game, we are setting where the position of the drone is. This is not being able to take place, the sign behaviors. First off, I don't want the Y position to be at the feet of the player. So if we put a negative value, that will set the Y position upwards. So the player's Y, which whatever that value is, minus, and I'm going to go 24 because our player's height is 20. So this will go just a little bit above his head. And there we go. It's floating above him now. Okay? All right. Well, we still have the same problem. We just moved where the drone is. But to get the drone to follow the player a little more fluid or naturally, we're going to use the Lerp expression. If you saw my last tutorial series about Mega Man wall slide and wall jump, towards the end of that project, we added the Lerp expression to the camera, because when you jump off the wall, the player moves pretty fast and the camera would jerk the view around, and it just wasn't pleasing to the eye. So we used the Lerp, which stands for linear interpolation. And what it means is the speed and distance that an object travels from one place to another. So if we go into our action here, double click into it, and for player X, at the very beginning of this X value, we can type in LERP for Lerp, and then it needs parentheses to put values in. And you see the tooltip for the Lerp expression comes up. It needs 3 values, A, B, and X. So A is where we start the movement. B is going to be where we want it to move to, and X will be the amount or speed. So our first value is going to be from the drone object itself. So we can type in drone, there's the object, and we want the drone's X position. So drone.x, we'll separate this with a comma. And then the second value is going to be where it's going to, which we want it to follow the player. So player X, comma. And the amount, this is something you can play around with, but you'll see real quickly that it deals in fractions. We're going to go 0.1 and end parentheses. And if we play that, now we have the horizontal sine behavior is back. That's because the x value is changing because of the sine behavior, and the Lerp expression is giving it a little leeway so it moves back and forth. But it's not moving back and forth at the magnitude of 16 pixels. So it's still a little restricted. But if we move, you see that it kind of lags behind us and then catches up, which is what we want. The y, not so much, but we have a start. Okay. Let's go back into this action, and let's do the same thing down here for our y. Let's type in Lerp in our parentheses, and then we want to go from the drone.y, comma, to the player.y, comma, and I'm going to leave that -24 in there because that's going to put it up above his head. And then after our last comma, let's put in a 0.1 end parentheses. So hit done. Let's play that. And there he is. He's moving up, barely, up and down, and side to side, barely. But now our lerping expression is taking effect on our player's position. Okay. Last thing we need to do is figure out why our sine behaviors no longer have an effect or have very little effect. So if we come in here and we want this to come from the drone position, both X and Y, but where we want it to go is lerping to our player's X, but we want to implement the value of the sine behavior. And this is real easy. If we go player X plus, and I want to access that sine behavior, and the sine behavior is tied into our drone object. So type in drone dot sine, and you see we have our two sine behaviors that we created, and this is the X value. So side to side, that's going to be the horizontal, so sine H. We're going to have to tell you what part of the sine we want it to add. So drone.sineH dot, and then it comes up in the suggestions. We want the value, which is going to be the magnitude. So now, whatever the distance is between drone X and player X, it's going to add whatever the magnitude is at that time. Moves it 16 pixels to the left, and then it comes back to 0 and moves it 16 pixels to the right, and then comes back to 0 and just goes back and forth like that. So if it's at, say, 5 pixels to the left, when we start moving, it's now going to incorporate that value into this equation. Let's do the same thing down here, but this is going to be a little different for the Y because we want it to be up above the player, and we have to put in this -24. So let's type out the rest of the expression that we want. We want player Y -24, and because it is the Y coordinate, if we add like we did up here, it will go down the screen. We want to subtract, so it will go up the screen. So let's say minus the drone dot sine, and this time we want the V for vertical, dot value. So we want this calculation to take place first, so that will place it above the player's head, and then it can subtract the value. So let's put another set of parentheses around our player Y -24. Okay, let's hit done. Let's play that. And I'll go full screen here. And we have a floating drone. It's doing somewhat of a circle motion, and then it starts kind of mixing it up, and now it's coming back the other way. So we got a little bit of a variety of movements. And when I move, it catches up with me while still keeping its floating nature that we created with the sign behaviors. Same way there. Okay, so now we have all those values that we put in with the sign behavior and with the lerping expression. And this is how I made that effect with the drone in the 5 Steps from Home challenge, which, by the way, if you have not seen that video, you should go check it out and go to my itch page and play the game. It's probably one of my better creations. All right, that is it for this video. I hope you are able to find something out of this helpful or useful. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.